you can visit our website for the commands in the videos. If you want to purchase other study materials like packet tracer files and other course guidelines, then you can email to us. Follow us on Facebook for further updates. Please do like, share, comment and subscribe so I can quickly deliver more videos on various topics. (192.168.40.1) for the fourth router's default gateway interface IP, okay, which is going to be the default gateway. You can go to the config on printer and go to settings, and in there you can assign the default gateway, and in the interfaces you can assign the IP address 192.168.40.5, okay, default subnet mask. After the configuration, you just keep fast forwarding 2-3 times always, okay, so that you can make sure the configuration has been updated on real time. And you can see all the cables are now blinking in green color, which means the status of interfaces are up. So we can proceed further. You can use the Alt plus D in order to fast forward as well. So far you might know that from PCA on the router 1, you can ping only the routers directly connected interfaces, right? Here up to 195.100.101. You can't ping the 195.100.102 even. Let me show you the networks which you can't ping here in color. So everything inside this blue color box can't be pinged, right? Without a routing protocol, you can't ping. So that is the purpose we need routing, okay? So we are going to specify static routing for these networks, okay? So on router 1, you can type the configurations for the static routing. Next, let's try to ping, okay? Let me show that as well. From PC1, if I ping 195.100.101, I can ping, right? Command prompt 195.100.101, okay? Ping space 195.100.100.1. You already know that. So you can see the reply is coming, right? So next, let me ping 195.100.102. Request timeout message will appear, okay? Because the packet can reach the router 2, but it can't return to router 1 back. That's the reason we are getting the request timeout, right? So when you configure the static routing, the router will know how to reach back as well, okay? Again, even if you try 195.100.102, you will get the request timeout message. Even if you try it again, still you will get the same request timeout message, okay? To stop the ping, you can press Ctrl C to terminate it immediately. Now close the X. So you can reach inside the router, and in the config mod, you can type all the static routing commands, right? Now we know how we are going to configure the commands. And before that, I wanted to tell you there are some advantages and disadvantages in static routing, okay? When you compare with the dynamic routing. In static routing, as I already told, an administrator manually configured it. The routers are going to give more preference than the dynamic routing into this static routing, because in dynamic routing, routers will communicate with one another and it will automatically calculate the routes for reaching the other routers. But for this purpose, the routers are going to consume some CPU performance. So in this case, which we will consider as routing overhead. But here in static routing, manually it's configured by the administrator. So there is no routing overhead, which is a benefit for us. But here in this scenario, I have just assigned only 4 routers, right? If you try to configure all the routes, when you configure a static route, you need to calculate a lot and then only you can start configuring. In case, let's say if there is any other new routers added, again you need to calculate each and every router from left to right and right to left, and again then only you can configure it. One by one on each and every router you need to update it manually. Okay, so in this way it's going to be complicated in a real environment. In a big company with several routers and switches, when you add a new router, you can't again and again calculate and perform this. It's going to be a headache for you, right? So this is going to be a disadvantage in static routing. And also while configuring this, it's a bit complicated and hard, okay? It's going to be a difficult task for us. It might consume a lot of time, and also you need to pay your employees as well, okay? So in this way, it's going to be a difficult task. And also in order to calculate each and every routers, the known networks and unknown networks, you need to have a thorough understanding of your entire network. Without that, an admin can't configure it. That also going to be a disadvantage here. In this scenario, dynamic routing can be considered a beneficial stop. Dynamic routing, when you configure it, in our upcoming sessions we'll have a look at that. There you don't need to calculate anything. You just simply specify the known networks. All other tasks, calculations and everything is done by the router itself. It will refer the route table and it will automatically communicate with other routers and calculate how to reach the other network. So in order to do that, it will consume a CPU performance. When configuring static route, you will face something called floating static route. Normally when you configure a static route, which is the primary one. In addition, if you need any other static route, you can implement a floating static route. Okay, so the router will prefer the primary one first. If the primary one is unavailable, then it will move on for the secondary one, which is the floating static route. Okay, so far we have already learned the calculation process from left to right and right to left on each and every routers. Now it's time for us to have a look at the command. Okay, so our command is going to be IP space route space unknown network address, which is going to be our remote network, and then subnet mask of the unknown network or remote network. Then you will face something called next stop IP or else exit interface, which I will explain in a few moments. After that, you will have admin distance. Admin distance is the optional command. Okay, so for static routing, admin distance by default it is 1. And for floating static route, admin distance is, you can specify anything greater than 1. Okay. Now let's have a look at the router 1's static route configuration. We already calculated 192.168.20.30.40. and 196 network and 197 networks are unknown for the R1 router. So we are going to configure static routing for R1 first. So initially IP space route. In our config mod, you need to type in the router. Okay. Next, you are going to specify the remote network 196.100.100.0. You don't need to specify the exact IP address of the interface. Only the network you need to tell. Okay. So 100.100.0 and /30 means you know the subnet mask is going to be 255.255.255.252. Okay. So if you have any doubts in the subnet mask, you can refer our IP calculations tutorial. Okay. After that, we can move on for the next hop IP address or exit interface. Next hop in the sense, next router. From router R1, when you move from left side to right side, since there are routers only in the right side for router R1, when you move from left side to right side, which is the immediate interface, that is going to be the next hop IP address. You can see the router R2's serial 01 interface, which is 195.100.102, which is going to be the next hop IP address for router R1. Not only for this particular 196 network, any other networks, 197 network or 192.168.20.30.40. all 5 networks, the next hop IP address is going to be 195.100.102. Okay, because it's in the right side, it's going to be the immediate one. Once after passing that interface only, the packets can reach other networks. Okay, you can consider it as the next hop IP address. So in case if you wanted to use exit interface instead of the next hop IP address, then you can try the serial 00 interface of router R1, which means on router R1 to go outside, it needs to pass the serial 00 interface, which is on the right side routers. Okay, if it is desiring to go for the right side routers, then it needs to pass the serial 00 interface of the own router R1. Okay, then only it can move. Okay, simply think, if you are inside a room, in order to go outside, you need to open the door and go, right? So which is what happening there. Okay, again, if you need to reach the other room, again you need to open the door of that particular room and enter inside, right? One is called the next hop IP address or exit interface on the own router. Okay, so next you can consider the admin distance, which is an optional one, but in case if you wanted to use it, you can try 1. Okay, for static routing, 1 is the default admin distance. Even if you didn't specify anything, it's going to take the default value 1. For floating static route, in case if your primary static route is going to fail, the router is going to use the secondary static route. You can specify an admin distance. For example, you can use a value greater than 1 in order to use a floating static route. Okay, so for the floating static route, you can use the value, for example, you can specify 5 for the floating static route admin distance. So router will check whether for the primary static route, if the link is available, it will use the primary one. If the link is not available or if there is any other inconvenience reaching that static route, then it will move on for the floating static route. Okay, by using the exit interface or next hop IP address. When you do model questions on CCNA and other networking exams, these things are tested. Okay, so you can have a look at that and confirm. So far we have experienced the static routing configuration for 196. Then if you wanted to configure static routing for 197 or 192.168.20. or 30. or 40, you can use the same method to implement static routing. Okay, since there are no any other routers in the left side of router R1, you just simply configure all these 5 routes for router R1. Okay, so right to left in router R1, you don't need to calculate anything. Now let's move on for router R2. So initially, as I already explained, left to right, you need to check what are the unknown networks first. So simply you can see 197 network is going to be an unknown network, 197.100.100 network, and 192.168, 30. and 40. networks. All these 3 are in right side of router R2. So you need to write IP route space 197.100.100.0, which is the unknown network, and its subnet mask 255.255.255.252, and then next hop IP address is from the right side. Router R2 is having 196.100.102 as the next hop IP address. Okay, So you can write it, or else you can use the exit interface. Similarly, you can try the other routes as well. 192.168.30.10 and 40. Same next hop IP address has been used, right? By passing that interface only, it can reach those networks. Next, right to left of router R2. Left side, the unknown network is 192.168.10.0 network. Okay. So you will specify IP route 192.168.10.0 space the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Why? The side is 24. If it is /24, you just simply do that. Next up IP address is from right to left. So next we'll have a look at the next hop IP address. From right to left for router R2, 195.100.100.1 is going to be the next hop IP address. Okay. By reaching this IP address only, it can reach the 192.168.10. network, right? This is what simply explains. So any router in the left side of router R2, it needs to be passing the 195.100.100.1. So then only it can reach the local area network, LAN PCs on 192.168.10. network. So simply that is what explains. So likewise you can calculate unknown networks and known networks for router R3 and R4 and then write the configurations in a text document or anything, or directly you can write it in the router. Okay. We have already referred what are the commands you need to implement here. So we just have to copy the commands and paste it. Okay. You can see all commands I have explained earlier. I can simply copy all the commands and paste it in the config mod. Or one by one, if you want, you can copy and paste. Okay. You can type it. As a beginner, if you wanted to practice, keep typing and work out. Okay. That's the only way you can easily understand this stuff. Okay. Since I have done these things a lot of times, I'm just focusing on copying and pasting. Okay. Just to demonstrate you. But if you wanted to get the practice on hand, you just have to type and practice. Okay. Then only you will understand it better. So you can see IP route and the 196 network with subnet mask has been specified. Next, the next hop IP address has been given. 195.100.100.2. Okay. To reach the other network. Now go to config mod of router 1. Before that, if you want to check the route table, you can type show IP route. Okay. You can see the route table is showing only the directly connected networks. Okay. So these are the networks it can reach by now. After the configuration, you can see all other networks will be displayed in the route table. Okay. So by now it can reach only 195.100.100 network and 192.168.10. network. Okay. So let's go to the config mod. Type config T and paste the command. Okay. Use the paste button to paste the command. Okay. You can't use the Ctrl C or Ctrl V to copy and paste. Okay. You need to right click and paste or use the buttons for paste. Okay. Now try the show IP route command in the privilege mod. You can see 196 network has been added to the route table. Right. You can see it's showing S because it's static route. Okay. Directly connected networks are mentioned as C. What I am highlighting is admin distance and metric value. Okay. Which you will see in the upcoming lessons. Okay. The next one 195.100.100.2 is the next hop IP address. Okay. Via that interface only it can reach the 196 network. Okay. This is what being specified by route table information. Again go to config mod and copy all other commands and paste it. Okay. You can copy everything at once and again paste it. No issues. Paste the commands. In the privilege mode, again type show IP route. Now you can see all the static routes and directly connected networks are there in the routing table. Okay. Gateway of last resort is not set, is displaying, which means you haven't specified any default route yet. Okay. Later we will see what is default route and all. At that time you will understand it. Okay. By now just focus only on static route. Okay. Next you can go for router 2. Okay. Copy all the commands and again paste on router 2 config mod. After copying, you can go inside the router 2 and enter the privilege mod and config mod. Then paste the commands. Okay. To save the configuration, you must do the copy run start or else WR write command, right? Confirm, enter it. Okay. Now again type show IP route to refer the routing table. Okay. You can see the route table of router 2 now. Okay. Similarly, you can do the same thing for router 3 and router 4. Just copy the commands and paste it in router 3 and 4. Okay. For now, just for practice, do the copy paste first. Later you can type and practice further. Okay. Initially you need to see the outcome of it, whether it's working for you or not, right? So that's why. On router 3, go to the config mod and paste the commands. Again go for the router 4 commands. We have already discussed about the commands, right? In our previous lessons you can refer and see. Okay. All the commands are displayed and explain properly how I choose the commands and what are the reasons behind the networks I selected and what are the IP addresses involved in that commands. Everything I have discussed earlier. Okay. Go to the router 4 commands and copy paste in the config mod of router 4. Okay. Show IP route to verify the route table initially. Okay. Go to config mod, paste, enter, save config and show IP route. Okay. You can see. You can visit our website for the commands in the videos. If you want to purchase other study materials like packet tracer files and other course guidelines, then you can email to us.